Maybe you've heard of Walt Williams, maybe you haven't. But once you see what he could do on the court, you'll understand why they called him the Wizard. One of the first point forwards, Williams was 6'8" with guard skills, yet could score with the best of them. However, it was never fully on display in the NBA. He had his moments and some good years with the Kings, but injuries plagued him throughout his career, as he couldn't reach the level that he had in college. But that would be pretty hard, as Walt Williams was a college superstar who may have done more for Maryland Terrapins basketball than any other player in history. As while scandals and violations engulfed the program throughout Williams' time there, he stayed loyal to Maryland while knowing he'd never get an opportunity to experience the big dance. But he would still leave there as one of the greatest players in school history. So while his NBA career may not have reached its potential, his college career exceeded expectations and then some.
But in terms of modern Maryland basketball, the most important player could be Walt Williams.
Let's jog your memory. Growing up in Temple Hills, Maryland, Walt Williams attended Crossland High School, where he would begin as a point guard, but be relegated to playing center due to his size. However, even in high school, he wasn't an instant star, as he had to wait for his time. But that time definitely came as a senior, as the now 6'8" Williams would do a bit of everything for the team, averaging 22 points, 10 boards, 5 blocks, 4 assists, and 3 steals, and would lead Crossland to a 25-1 record, which included a regional championship, as his high school coach would speak very highly of him. And while Williams had college options, he had made his decision before his senior season began, as he stayed home to attend Maryland, as it was a dream come true to attend the same school as his favorite player, Len Bias. Maryland had a cloud hanging over the program from the mid-'80s, after the tragic passing of Len Bias and the subsequent scandal and violations revealed soon after, which led to the controversial resignation of legendary coach Lefty Driesell, with many seeing the coach being used as a scapegoat. But by the time Williams committed, Maryland was a good team and had made a tournament appearance in 1988 under new head coach Bob Wade. But things started going south once he arrived, as many of their players from last year transferred, including big man Brian Williams, with academic issues preventing top guard Rudy Archer from playing. But they still had a solid core, which included junior Tony Massenberg, senior John Johnson, and highly touted freshman Gerard Mustaf. But Mustaf would be the more used freshman this season, with Williams spending a lot of the year in a bench role. But he did have his moments as a starter, yet he was also slowed by a fractured finger he suffered in late January, which even caused him to miss a few games. And Maryland went backwards, as after a solid 6-3 start, the team only won 2 more games, to finish the regular season at 8-19. But by the time the ACC tournament came along, Williams was a starter, and spent a lot of time on the floor, as the Terrapins pulled off one of the biggest upsets in program history, when they defeated a nationally ranked NC State team, before losing to North Carolina the following night, as Williams' freshman season ended with him averaging about 7.5 points, 3.5 rebounds, and 2.5 assists per game. So with Maryland still being under an active investigation for violations, all eyes were on the program, and Wade would get struck with his own alleged recruitment violations, which led to his resignation, and the eventual hiring of Gary Williams prior to the 1990 season. Under Williams, the team became an offensive force, and Walt Williams was responsible for a lot of that. Now a full-time starter, Williams would become the team's 3rd leading scorer. But more interesting was that Gary Williams saw the same versatility which had led Wade to try out Williams at the point during the previous season, as with his 6'8" size, Williams could play on the wing or could play down low in a small ball lineup. But most impressively, with his ball handling, shooting, and passing vision, he could play the point and run your offense. And that's what he would do more and more as his Maryland career went on, as he led the Terps in assists and shot nearly 45% from deep. So Maryland was looking much better, and were 8-4 going into a matchup with North Carolina, where Walt Williams made his official arrival, as an unstoppable performance would see him drop 33 points and lead Maryland to their first home win over UNC in 7 years. And they would beat them again in Chapel Hill about a month later, as they finished the regular season at 18-14. Then in the conference tourney quarterfinals versus Duke, Williams came out on fire with 18 first half points, But it was a different story in the second, as he went scoreless before fouling out in a loss. And while Maryland had a good year, they wouldn't get a tournament berth, but would get some postseason action in the NIT, first beating UMass before losing to Penn State, as Williams' sophomore season had seen him average about 12.5 points, 4 rebounds, and 4.5 assists per game. But a bombshell had dropped during the ACC tournament, and it could have spelled the end of Walt Williams' time at Maryland. So during the tournament, the sanctions would come down hard on Maryland, as they received the harshest of punishments, with a 2-year ban from postseason play and a 1-year ban from televised games, stemming from Bob Wade's violations. And with Williams looking more and more like a star, with NBA potential, it didn't really benefit him to stay at Maryland. And while he would explore his options, in the end, he remained a Terp, as Maryland was always his dream, and he made a commitment to the program. And being locked in as the team's starting point guard and centerpiece of the offense was too good to walk away from. So while no one outside of Maryland could see it, Williams kept the program respectable. And with Mustaf and Massenberg leaving for the NBA, Williams had a lot more offensive responsibility, as he would lead the team in scoring. But a fractured fibula would lead to him missing most of the second half of the year, with Maryland upsetting Virginia in the season finale to finish their first season of probation at 16-12, with Williams' junior year seeing him average about 18.5 points, 5 rebounds, and 5.5 assists per game. Then by the 1992 season, Maryland had a full-blown star in Walt Williams. Williams would establish himself as one of the best players in the nation during his senior season, as he would take on the most responsibility of his college career, with his 26.8 points per game, leading the ACC and being a top 10 mark in the nation, while also setting the record for the highest single-season scoring average in program history. But he did get some scoring help from junior big man Evers Burns. And Maryland came out the gate hot, winning 7 of their first 8, but after that they went on an 8-game losing skid. However, during this time, Williams went on a legendary scoring tear, as his 5th straight 30-point game would break their losing streak against Clemson. And while he would extend that streak to 7 games, the Terps only won 2 times during that stretch, and overall they would finish the regular season at 13-14. And Williams would finish the season as both a first-team All-ACC member and a second-team All-American. But if Maryland wanted a spot in the ACC tournament, they would have to beat Clemson in a play-in game. Yet Williams refused to lose, as he went for 38 points and 14 rebounds, while leading Maryland to a win, and breaking Len Bias' single-season point total record. However, the very next night, they had to play Duke, and while Williams and the Terps put up a valiant effort, with Williams dropping 25, Maryland lost by 7, as Williams' senior season ended with him averaging about 27 points, 3.5 assists, and 2 steals per game. So Walt Williams ended his college career as one of the greatest players in Maryland program history, and an overall shining light during their darkest days. But what else would you expect from a player known as the Wizard, a nickname Williams would say that he received during his freshman season after his teammate Jesse Martin had started referring to him as Wizzy Walt, and Bob Wade misheard it as Wizard.
And that in practices, he started calling me the Wizard because he thought that Jesse Martin was calling me the Wizard instead of Wizzy Walt.
But whatever you wanted to call him, he was a surefire lottery pick as he entered a top-heavy 1992 NBA draft.
Pick in the 1992 NBA draft, the Sacramento Kings select Walt Williams from the University of Maryland.
So after a lot of big men came off the board, the versatile Williams was drafted 7th overall by the Kings. And this was intriguing, as the Kings had talented players throughout their starting lineup, with point guard Spud Webb, star 2-guard Mitch Richmond, small forward Lionel Simmons, and power forward Wayman Tisdale. But the beauty of Williams was that he could be effective playing any of those positions. And you automatically have high hopes for someone who gets compared to both George Gervin and Magic Johnson, as Williams looked like he would give coach Gary St. Jean some lineup flexibility whenever he was available, except he wasn't always available, as a lot of Kings would deal with injury this year, most notably Richmond, who missed nearly half the season, but Williams would miss 23 games of his own, mostly due to a mid-season finger fracture. However, when he did play, he showed why he was a top 7 pick, even putting up a career-high scoring average in year 1 to finish as the team's third leading scorer. And he had done that with a heavy heart, as he had lost his father shortly before the season began. But Williams was showing that he could score at the next level no problem. And his best performance came in a January 2nd game versus the Sixers, which saw Sacramento humiliate Philly with a 56-point win, as Williams led the way with a career-high 40 points off the bench, while adding 4 steals and 4 blocks. And after Richmond went down for the season in February, Williams became a starter for the rest of the year and put up over 20 points per game in his remaining 24 games, en route to a second-team all-rookie selection. But with so many injuries, the Kings really had no chance, as they would finish at 25-57 and miss the playoffs, with Williams' rookie season ending with him averaging about 17 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 3 assists per game. The Kings starters would play a much healthier season in '94, but this meant that Williams would return to his bench role, even after such a great stretch as a starter to end last season. But while the starters stayed healthy, Williams again missed significant time, as he appeared in just 57 games and had again suffered a fractured fibula, among other injuries. And in turn, he would see his numbers drop across the board. And while some of that can be chalked up to less minutes, Williams also had the worst shooting season of his career, as it just seemed like nothing would fall for him. And with Williams battling through an injury late in the season, resulting in his worst stretch of the year, the Kings shut him down with about a month left, due to a foot sprain, as they would finish with a 28-54 record and again miss the playoffs, as Williams' second year had seen him average about 11 points, 4 rebounds, and 2.5 assists per game. But the Kings made a rebrand going into the '95 season, and Williams looked like a new man in the new uniform. Up to this point, Williams hadn't taken his off seasons as seriously as he should, reporting to the team out of shape in each of his first 2 seasons. But he took the '94 offseason seriously and would report to the team in the best shape of his career, which also led to the first healthy season of his career, as he would play in a career-high 77 games. And with the quick deterioration of Lionel Simmons' knees, Williams would be the team's new starter at small forward, and fill in well for Simmons as the team's second leading scorer. But a healthy Williams showed that he could do much more than just score, as he would show his ability to facilitate with a career-high 4.1 assists per game. And his long-range shooting touch had returned, finishing second to Richmond in attempted and made threes, as he hit them at a 35% clip. And while Williams wasn't a perfect defender, he was showing improvement and never lost his ability to use his great length to force turnovers, as he led the Kings in steals. And a Kings team who had normally relied solely on their offense would slow it down in '95 and put a lot more emphasis on defense. But it was working, as the Kings were putting together their best season in years, as they were as much as 8 games above 500 around the trade deadline. But a 7-game losing skid proved costly, as they would end up finishing the season at 39-43, and narrowly missed out on the West's final playoff spot, as Williams' redemption season would see him average about 16.5 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 4 assists per game. Williams began the '96 season as a King, and while he would see a bit of a drop in his scoring, he was still putting up good numbers, with the same efficiency as last year. However, while Williams started well, he would eventually hit a slump, and soon after, with the Kings in the midst of another losing streak, they made a change. The Kings may have liked to trade Williams after his poor '94 season, but also knew that he wouldn't fetch much in a trade. So instead, they had worked with him to improve his dedication and durability. And after a season and a half of healthy and productive play, he had value. And there had also been reports that Williams and St. Jean had a rocky relationship after Williams' first 2 years. But likely the main reason why the Kings were frustrated was due to Williams' inconsistent play, as you just didn't know what you were going to get each night, as Sacramento would move the man who was once looked at as an important piece to their future to Miami at the trade deadline, with Williams' Kings teammates being upset about this trade and even honoring him after he was dealt. But Williams would join a Heat team in a period of transition, as they had brought in Pat Riley before the season, who had quickly acquired Alonzo Mourning and had now acquired Tim Hardaway at the same time as they had brought in Williams. So Williams would become more of a role player on a team with 2 legit stars in Mourning and Hardaway. And while his numbers would again drop, his efficiency was at an all-time high, even shooting a blistering 45.5% from deep in his 28 games with the Heat. And with the team finishing at 42-40, he made his first playoff appearance and was set to take on the Bulls in round 1. And while Williams would have a solid 12 points and 8 boards in game 1, he would go ice cold the remainder of the series, scoring 2 more points over the next 2 games, as the Bulls easily wrapped it up with a sweep. And Williams' overall season ended with him averaging about 13.5 points, 4.5 rebounds, and 3 assists per game. But after the season, Williams would opt out of his final 2 years of his contract and enter free agency, as he was hoping to secure a big deal in a free agent class that was thin at small forward. But that's the opposite of what would happen, as about a month later, Williams signed a bargain deal to join the second-year Toronto Raptors, as he had originally thought that he'd be re-signed by the Heat. But with the Heat making a push for Juwan Howard, they would ultimately renounce Williams' rights, as while he was taking a huge pay cut, he was at least joining a team that wanted him, a team who were led by Damon Stoudemire and rookie big man Marcus Camby. And with Toronto still fielding one of the league's weaker rosters, Williams would become a primary option on offense, as he averaged the most minutes of his career and finished as the team's second leading scorer, while continuing as a lethal shooter from deep, averaging a career-high 6 threes per game, yet still draining 40% of them, which got him a spot in the 97 three-point shootout and saw him advance to the semifinals. So Williams spent his season as a solid veteran presence with Toronto and dropped at least 20 points in 22 games, and would even pull down a career-high 5 rebounds a night. But this was still a second-year expansion team, and while they would show noticeable improvement in year 2, they still finished with a 30-52 record, which wasn't enough for the playoffs, as Williams' first year in Toronto had seen him average about 16.5 points, 5 rebounds, and 2.5 assists per game. Williams remained a Raptor to begin the following season and had been rewarded over the offseason with a new 5-year, $20 million contract. But after a few healthy years, the injuries came back, with Williams being in and out of the lineup over the first half of the season, with his play seeing a significant drop as he would even be demoted to a bench role. But then the trade deadline rolled around, and the Raptors struck a deal with the Blazers, with Portland acquiring Stoudemire. But also included in that package was Walt Williams, as Williams would join a Blazers team with good young players like Isaiah Ryder and Rasheed Wallace. And with Portland having roster depth, Williams became more of a rotational piece, seeing a big drop in his minutes, yet still providing a respectable scoring punch off the bench, as he would be healthy during his 31 games in Portland. And with Portland finishing with a 48-34 record, they would be going to the postseason to take on the LA Lakers. Williams proved his worth in this series, as he would score at least 14 points off the bench in each of the first 3 games, and his series best 17 points and 8 rebounds in Game 3 would help the Blazers get their first win of the series, but the Lakers would wrap it up 2 nights later. And while foul trouble did plague Williams in this series, he also shot about 55% from the field and over 53% from deep, and his overall season had seen him average about 10.5 points, 3.5 rebounds, and 2 assists per game. The lockout-shortened 99 season would be much healthier for Williams, and while he continued in primarily a bench role, his efficiency saw major improvement, as he acted as one of Portland's best 3-point shooters, hitting them at a career-high 43.8% clip. And with Portland now boasting a top 5 offense in the league, they were turning into a real threat in the West, as they ended their season at 35-15 and got a first-round matchup with Phoenix. A minute's decrease would see Williams score just 13 points combined in the series, but he still made sure to add a little bit of his wizardry to the offense in what would be a 3-game sweep for Portland. Williams would get more minutes in their second-round series versus Utah, but he had a lot of trouble getting his shot to fall. However, the Blazers got out to a quick 3-1 lead and would close it out in 6, with Williams providing a good spark off the bench in the closeout game, as Portland was advancing to the conference finals to take on San Antonio. But after a solid Game 1, Williams would go cold, and overall the Spurs were just too much for the Blazers, as they would sweep Portland, and Williams' season would end with him averaging about 9.5 points, 3 rebounds, and 1.5 assists per game. But with the Blazers trying to secure as much talent as possible, Williams was on the move again. So Williams found himself in Houston to begin the following season, as he had been included in the massive package which netted the Blazers Scottie Pippen, as Williams would join a Rockets team with both an aging Hakeem Olajuwon and Charles Barkley, as well as youth in Steve Francis and Coutinho Mobley. And Williams would return to a starting role in 2000 and would average double figures for the final time in his career, as his first year in Houston would be one of the most efficient of his career. But he was now on a Rockets team who were beginning their transition out of the Olajuwon era, as with an uncharacteristically poor defense, they would turn in their worst record in years, at 34-48, which wouldn't be enough for the playoffs, as Williams' year ended with him averaging about 11 points, 4 rebounds, and 2 assists per game. Williams began the following season as a starter, but was struggling, and with the Rockets acquiring forward Maurice Taylor over the offseason, they would prioritize their young players, and Williams would eventually be moved to the bench after his poor start, as his scoring and efficiency would see a drop this season. But he was still a guy you had to respect due to his shooting ability, which only helped open up the paint. And with the Rockets showing significant improvement on defense, they would finish with a 45-37 record. Yet in a very competitive Western Conference, this wasn't enough for the playoffs, as Williams' year ended with him averaging about 8.5 points, 3.5 rebounds, and 1.5 assists per game. The 0-2 season saw the Rockets deal with injury to some top players, and their offense suffered because of it. And while Williams continued as a great shooter and solid producer off the bench, he couldn't escape the injuries either, as he would only appear in 48 games. Yet he would start over half of those games. But with Houston's offense and defense taking a huge step back, their record plummeted to 28-54, as they again missed the playoffs, with Williams' shortened year seeing him average about 9.5 points, 3.5 rebounds, and 1.5 assists per game. But Williams' contract was up, and as he was set to enter his 11th year, he was looking for a contender. Williams would sign with the Dallas Mavericks for the 2003 season, and while he wouldn't be able to give the team big minutes, a fast-paced offense that relied on the three-point shot was perfect for Williams. Williams would play in 66 games, yet put up the lowest numbers of his career, while playing his lowest minutes. But with Steve Nash and Dirk Nowitzki on the team, the Mavs would end the season as the league's highest-scoring offense, and their 60 wins would tie for the most in the NBA, as they took on Portland in round 1. Yet Williams would only see the court in 2 games, and while Dallas almost choked, they made it out in 7. The second round brought Sacramento, and Williams would see action in every game, with Game 3 being his most memorable, as while he didn't check in until midway through the fourth quarter, he finished with 10 points in a huge double OT win for Dallas, and another 7-game series would end in Dallas's favor, as they were moving on to the conference finals to take on San Antonio. Williams was used sparingly over the first 3 games, but when Dirk went down for the rest of the series in Game 3, Williams' number was called, as he would be inserted into the starting lineup for Game 4. But it wasn't good, as he went 1 of 7 from deep for 7 points, and the Mavs fell behind 3-1. But Williams redeemed himself in Game 5, as he would again start and finish with 12 points and 8 rebounds, and Dallas would force a Game 6. Then in Game 6, Williams came out and dropped 17 points while adding 3 blocks. But it wasn't enough, as San Antonio wrapped it up, and Williams' year in Dallas ended with him averaging about 5.5 points, 3 rebounds, and 1 assist per game. But that solid playoff run from Williams would be the end of the road, as he called it a career after the season, and in later years would return to his alma mater as a broadcaster. Walt Williams was supremely talented, and he knew that, and when he was healthy, he showed just how great of a player he was. But constant injuries throughout his early years seemed to set the tone for the majority of his career. And while he never became the superstar that he was at Maryland, he was still someone who could do so much for your team, and became one of the league's best three-point shooters as his career went on. And while you may look at his NBA career as nothing noteworthy, what he did for Maryland basketball is what deserves the most recognition. And at the end of the day, he was a lottery pick and played an effective role in the NBA for over a decade. And in an era where the point forward wasn't really a legitimate position, Williams may not have been used in the way he should. But whether it was college or the NBA, he did things that no one else could do, much like a wizard would. But that's it for today's episode on Walt Williams. Hope you enjoyed it, and make sure to subscribe for more videos like this one. If you liked it, check out this one on his Kings teammate, or this one on his Raptors teammate. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.